Right.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spitter Rack. Dude, we got news. And today we're going to be talking about that crazy thing that's just happening now where Warner Brothers, aka T, the big giant, they want to make all 17 of their new 2021 movies free, well not free, but
Free.
HBO
So you
Max.
said it right
No,
the
it's not
first time. Free for them.
waves, it is causing waves. Actors are like, yo, what's going on with my bonuses? The theater company's like, what the goony goo going on? Here, I got my boys, Petey and Cal. I'm going to pass it over to Petey. Petey, let's start getting into it. Give us a little background on this and let's move forward with that.
Well, obviously, we're in a pandemic and they have movies ready to go, but they know that the ticket sales aren't going to be there. Obviously, Tenet didn't show what it would have shown because we know Christopher Nolan's movies have done, like $1 billion. The last couple have just been like, he's just some of the most successful movies of one filmmaker, and they're not even like, to have was it a war movie, that sort of period piece to do that well. So ultimately, you can see his sales were kind of hurt, but it's in a pandemic. But one of the bigger issues, he's one of the first people to come out and complain and say that, hey, Warner Brothers is one of the biggest and most successful movie company. And then now they're moving it to, his exact words, the worst streaming service out there, right? And so then also James Gunn is also having the same sort of similar sentiment about it. And then, of course, they've also talked in this article in The Times is a little more clearer, that, pointing out how Gal Gadot is at a period where they're like, well, she's not going to be making the money. She also, there was like a third movie, so they're like, oh, we got to keep her. So they gave her like 10 million. And then the other actors are in the same boat. So there's like sort of this thing sort of building up. But, that's money in the short term because it'll also build up their HBO Max thing because they have a bunch of things that aren't ready to go yet. So it's kind of works out for the Warner Brothers, that sort of family of them moving stuff to there, where ultimately the bigger issue is that initial sale. So how do the filmmakers make the money they were supposed to? This just makes things like, oh, we're going to make up all of, Warner Brothers makes all their money through Max. So like, hey, just slide this over here, make no deals, and we get our streaming service gets kind of built up. So that's the story in a nutshell.
So what's the problem, bro?
Oh my gosh. The problem being is that if you have say Tenet wasn't, they decided not, or Tenet or Milan, right? Let's use both of those, that both had their own struggles, right? Say that they decided not to release either of them. And they said, you know what, we don't know what's going to happen. The ticket sales aren't going to be there. We need to sell it to a streaming service. And they say, we're gonna sell our movie to Netflix. Netflix will give them a lot more money. Then you have a bidding war between Netflix, all these other people, and then Warner Brothers or Disney, for either of those movies, they still make their money back selling it to these companies because they make the maximum amount. This is sort of a FX, like a Fox deal with X-Files, where Fox took X-Files before it, got the syndication, and then they sold it to FX, and they made a ton of money off of that. And that's when David Duchovny sued, and the company sued, and then he also, it hurt the show in general because he wasn't on it anymore. They had a new cast, and it kind of dulled the last couple seasons of the X-Files, being caught in this sort of this suit where they're not in the right, but it's like there's something they shouldn't have done because it kind of hurt that show, and he had to sue. What do you do? So it is money in the short term, like you said, money that they need. They want to make money, and it also helps HBO Max. That's the studio. That's Warner Brothers' angle. But it's not giving the money to the filmmakers, and the filmmakers will be lowballed into making way less money. There's a ton of, like Keanu Reeves, Hugh Jackman. There's a ton of people that are out there that are a ton to lose, but the studios tend to gain because of HBO Max. They're trying to build their streaming service, and this is like a big plus for them. That's what I got.
Okay, so let me just make sure I got this before I pass it on to Cal. I just want to make sure I got it in American English and English and Australian English. Okay, Nigerian English. Let's just make sure we got what we're saying. We're saying that in the midst of a pandemic where the companies are unable to make any money, and I mean, let's not say Tenet actually for a pandemic made $369 million, which is bigger than anything else has made so far. And it did, in pandemic, that much. Outside the pandemic, it probably would have made double that, probably closer to $1 billion. All right, but it's still a hit relative to but you got to put the asterisk for the pandemic. Okay.
Yes.
But that's not the typical thing. The big budgets, these films are basically financed by companies, and they have to pay interest. They have to pay back these loans. And part of the traditional structure is you go to movie theaters, then you go to pay-per-view, you go to sales, you go to streaming, and you go to general broadcast. So there are many multiple streams of income that these guys are making. But the biggest upfront is the theater. And right now, the possibility of doing that because of the pandemic doesn't make sense, right? So the big movies are making less than $10 million at the max, probably $4 to $10 million right now, right? So they're not going to get back their initial investment. So Warner Brothers and all the others are looking at these huge films, that they have. Warner Brothers has 84, Wonder Woman 84. They have Godzilla versus King Kong. They have Dune, amongst others that are coming out. 17 films, you're saying. And so they had them on the shelf last year. Now they're coming up on the shelf this year, right? They have to do something. At the same time, Netflix is making $20 billion a year off its streaming service. Yeah. Warner Media made $14 billion a year in traditional format. I mean, of course, they probably did a couple other different things, but AT&T, the parent of Warner Media, looks at this and said, "Whoa, wait a second. They're making money like crazy in the pandemic. They may make up to $30 billion. We're not sure so far. But we're stuck in this. We can't produce, we can't make, we can't get any films, and we're stuck where we're at, right? So what do we do to enhance our only major streaming service, HBO Max? They said, hey, why don't we just have a big year all around and bring the big in? And that's what they did. Booyaka!
That's what idea.
Rolling. Now the stars, of course, not liking it. You can't blame it. If you're talented, you put stuff in, But Disney's been doing this roller coaster on people for years, and that's why a lot of them gravitated to Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers has always been the home of the creatives, I guess, But now, again, Warner Brothers isn't Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is what? AT&T. And so they have a different look on how to handle these things. The same thing goes with Universal. Remember when Universal was that big outcry when they did Trolls World Tour? Cal, you should know because you really like that movie. But Trolls World Tour, they had Universal, which is a cable company, and they said, hey, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put our movies directly to pay-per-view or whatever. And we haven't seen the numbers, but they claim they did extremely well, at least in opening. And it was number one on some of these the pay sites, so for a little while. So the question, again, and they're a cable company. So you have two companies coming from outside the industry making different moves. Okay. Lastly, Disney is having a huge announcement this Thursday. They had an announcement a couple of weeks ago where they basically said they're going to be offering more of their stuff, such as Soul on Disney Plus. Also don't forget they had that Mulan pay window that they set in Disney Plus because they want to also get more windows. We've talked about this, and basically what we've said is that the big studios have been flat-footed all along about while Netflix has been able to continually week after week produce more new products. I'm not saying the quality's all there, but come on. I think they don't have much of a choice. They're going to have to do something, or else they're going to have to say, hey, Netflix, just eat our cake. So I'm going to pass it over for Cal, because I know Cal, I feel the way he's feeling. He's agreeing with me once again, as always. Cal, I'll give you 2 or 3 words, and we'll go back and slam Petey once more.
Oh, gosh.
And there it is. Thank you, Cal. So, Pete, I don't think really a lot of these actors and actresses, I agree, it's just that the only way, for them, how I look at the model, they're going to have to go out on a limb on their own. They may have to start going to different, if they want to get back the money they want, they need to probably go to Lionsgate, or they need to go to the other smaller studios to get what they want. But of course, they're not going to get the big studio lot. They're not going to get the big studio budget. And so that's what's going to happen.
I'm just saying that you can make a decent amount of money selling your film. Like the thing you brought up, you brought up the Legendary and the King Kong Godzilla movie.
That was outside of this. Yeah, we talked about that.
I'm saying that's a big thing. To saying that they can make their money, and they can make their money through Netflix. They can make
Netflix
that.
offered to buy Legendary's King Kong versus Godzilla for $200 million. You know, but Warner Brothers, who's also part of that film, kiboshed it, even though Legendary putting up a lot of the financing. So, you know.
That's what I'm saying. For some of these other ones, there might be more money out there to get, to say, hey, what if we do this? What if CBS wants to get a piece of it? What if some of these other places are trying to say, what if Disney decides, you know what, we can try to do that. I mean, try to really spread the thing around and say, hey, we can put this money up. But the way the Netflix model, that's what would be interesting to see what would happen if you would try to sell, like, you know, if they initially tried to sell Tenet and or Milan to Netflix and see how it would have done there. But, you know, because that's the biggest thing running, and that's what I think the filmmakers are saying. We have one other avenue, not just HBO Max. So
I think you make you're right. It's there, but I mean, and I feel bad for the creators, because you know what, they have a dog in this race, and they need to probably go in there and then push it. But if there's no income coming in, how do you do it? The whole deal with Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins and stuff like that, where they got money for their films and stuff, you know, doesn't seem currently fair if you look at it compared to the other artists. And that makes sense, you know. But you got to say like this, is that there's no money coming in.
Yeah.
You know, do they want to say, hey, it's 6 months and then 6 months and we're back to the 6 months and then we only do half your slate of films? I was shocked when Warner said they're going to do all 17, because, you know, I was kind of shocked too. I was like, whoa, what the goonie goo? But, you know, hey, they're taking the dice, and they're rolling it, and they're going to see, you know, because, you know, and then remember, this was all secret. They kept this all on the down low. Almost nobody knew anything about this until the last minute.
Yes.
And so, because, you know, if they would have put this out, they put a kibosh on it, you know. Yeah. So this dude, I think what's his name, Kyler, I believe his name is. This same dude who's making waves in DC, changing things up there. He was brought in to make changes, you know, streamline services, and most important, make more money for AT&T. AT&T is makes $140 billion a year. So Warner Media is but a small part of that whole pie. You know, the whole reason AT&T brought these guys in was to what? Make people have this service so that the people can get their telephone service, their cell phone service, amongst others. So let's realize the main game for them is not the film game and stuff like that. The main game is to sell more phones, sell more subscriptions. Yeah. That's their deal. And HBO Max, definitely, they want that to be the pinnacle, and that's what they want to do, you know? And thanks again, Cal, for agreeing with me. Once again, you the man, baby.
What are you talking about? You cut my mic.
It doesn't matter, bro. I mean, you're still on board. Remember what I always say? Silence is agreement.
You cut my mic. Anybody else listen to this show? It wasn't me being silent. You cut my mic.
You can't prove it, bro.
See, so this is stuff that would not happen if we were not having this pandemic. He would never even try to do this type of stuff.
Okay, be in studio.
Okay, we got Cal back. Let it loose.
What are you talking about? No, I don't agree with you. This is like a short-term. This is a short-term fix, because these guys, look, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure how they did it, Warner Brothers rollout of a streaming service was, I don't know, I don't really have the right word for it, but they had DC Universe going on one place. Then out of nowhere, you have HBO Max, and then there's a decision, okay, we're going to do one, not the other, but we're still going to try to keep that one viable. Then you have them being acquired by AT&T, and AT&T just came in saying, hey, look, we want money. You know, that's the one thing that I've been getting from them. So they were never able to really push the streaming service. Now, I think they're in a good position where they say, okay, fine, we got some stuff that's in the can. It's stuff people want to see. Let's put it over there. And they hopefully won't make the same, Disney went first with Mulan, so they can see, okay, fine, that's probably not going to work. Where we come over here, we're going to charge people, and, they have to have the streaming service. But long term, you want to put people back in the movie theater. That's where you're going to be able to get that concentrated money. You don't want to be dependent on a streaming service. And yes, Netflix makes $20 billion a year, but the majority of their stuff is not new stuff. The majority of this stuff is this is like rerun central at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. A lot of the original material that Netflix has, like, what are you talking about? Like something they did recently. Like, what is it? Like two forces or anything that's within their top 10. A lot of stuff is
Old Guard is
no, not talking about Old Guard. Not talking about Old Guard. I'm talking about the stuff that's in their top 10. I'm not talking about Old Guard. And a lot of that stuff would be like the Saturday afternoon movie that you would see when you had nothing else to do at home. Oh, that's what these guys would be. But wow. It works. It works on their streaming. It works on their streaming platform because you got more people home, and they've got a ton of stuff that people are willing. Hey, let me give it a go. And then you look at their top 10. Oh, this is top 10. Let me check it out. And you're like, why is this top 10? It's top 10 because somehow like 50 people watched it at the same time, and now the entire world is looking at this like it's some major film. But the majority of the stuff that they have is already paid for. It's not necessarily, as you already admitted to yourself, Mars, best quality. And they're not sinking a ton of money. They're not sinking a ton of money into new stuff on their own. The majority of the money they've sunk in the project of new is animation. If you've looked at if you look at the stuff they've come out with, but a lot of the original, they're not doing a ton of original series. The original series that have worked for them, the more expensive ones, are far, again, I'm not slating Netflix. Those runs over there have been fine, but the majority of their money is coming from, hey, somebody made a low budget movie, nobody else wanted it, here, bring it over to Netflix, we pay a nominal fee, these guys come over here and work. HBO Max, no, they can't do that. They have to go through their own, but the thing is though, they have a pretty deep catalog, as well as Disney. They have a pretty deep catalog on their own. So it's amazing that they haven't been able to get up to snuff a lot faster in terms of, getting people to really look at it as, something that's just as viable as Netflix, even though, to be quite honest, it's just not as viable as Netflix right now. I mean, how do you compete with that? Netflix like, yeah, we'll take everything as long as it's cheap. As long as it's cheap and we don't have to, keep paying out continuously large sums of money, we'll take it at the end of the day. HBO, Disney, these guys, their primary thing is, look, we need to put people in the movie theater. We're trying to do these things for the movie experience. So you can definitely make a whole bunch of money now and bring people to your streaming service, but you don't want to give up the theaters. Okay, that's bankable money without having to worry about somebody, without having to worry about somebody, downloading the film and pushing it that way and getting less streaming service this way and that way. You never want to give that up. Once somebody sits in a chair and gives up money, that's it. It's done. Why would you give that up?
I mean, you made a solid point, especially about the pirating and stuff like that. So I just want to throw out a couple of things, but here it is. Netflix production budget is over $10 billion, and they're saying some people maybe $17 billion for the upcoming year. $17 billion. That's almost all the revenue for Warner Media itself, right? They're making money in streaming. And they're making money whether it's old content or not, because they're giving people what they want. And look, what I'm saying is I get what you're saying. Yeah, there's a lot of reruns, but guess what? They've been able to connect with people, not only in the US, but all over the world, in England, in Africa, in India, basically where they're able to cater to their taste. And if you look at their offering, every week they have stuff from the US, India, Africa, Europe, where there's constantly churning more and more stuff. They have things to different demographics here in the United States also. And so they've been very successful with that model. It wasn't a model they wanted to do, but they were forced to it when the major studios, when they realized streaming was something that they can make money on themselves, and they forced Netflix to start making this play also. And so that's why. So it was what they're doing now was the mother of necessity before this bandwagon. And this goes back as far as when Blockbuster.
And they have done an excellent job with it, but to compare them to comparison of how well Netflix is doing, as opposed to say, looking at say
Warner,
Disney or or HBO, Warner Brothers, HBO, AT&T. I mean, it's the situation and the situation and the actualities are different.
Yeah. No, you see, this is what I'm saying. I think that's the problem, and I've been saying this again. They haven't been as fleet-footed as that they needed to be, like Netflix. Even Universal started jumping into it as early as, I think, April and May, when they were doing their release of Trolls World. They've been releasing other movies direct to video, or now they have this deal with AMC where it's in the movie theaters for like 2 weeks, and then it goes until they can put it in direct to video, but they got to pay the theater company. But that's the type of deals you have to do something creative, especially in situations like now. When you go to the movie theaters, you know, if you look at the numbers, there are less people going to the movie theaters than before. So yeah, the box office is big, but it's because they're raising the prices of the movies, right? And like I said, there's less people going. So if it's 1 million people that's going, and you're charging $10 before, now it's 10 million. Now if the same 10 people go, or 900,000, but you're charging $15, yeah, the box office goes up. But the amount of people going to the movies has actually continued to drop. And that's been a steady, consistent change. Releasing it on direct video makes a lot of sense, you know, for the streaming company, or, you know, for the streaming company, as well as for the, well, I guess for the streaming company. Who else is it there? Let's be for real. But hold on, one last point. One last point I want to make is that not only did they have to do it, you know, they could have done it sooner, and they did not. All right? The whole year went by where they lost billions and billions of dollars, you know? And there's no conspiracy theory that the studios intentionally did this so that they could bring down the studio, so they could change the studio model. But it's going to have to change, because I guarantee you, if you have a pay-per-view, people are going to jump on a new release on a regular basis. That's all I got to say, bro. Once again, champion!
All right. Let's look at Black Widow, which they could just put it on Disney Plus. But Feige is obviously holding on because he knows it's going to lessen his power as far as, and rightfully so. Like, if he just loses that money just moving it to Disney Plus and it does Milan numbers, he wants at least 500 million. 500 million for that Widow thing. He's hoping for that. It could do more in the theaters if we ever get back to normal. If they get down to that and they just say, hey, we're just going to shuttle your movies right to Disney Plus, and it does, hey, you know, for us it kind of, and then you can just sort of hide the actual profits. That's the other problem, is like they can say, no, the subscription went up, but it's really for the Mandalorian and all this other stuff, not really for your Black Widow. Like, you didn't even have faith in Black Widow. So that's what
I have faith in Black Widow.
You have to turn. That's what I want to say to you. You have to turn and say, this is your film. It's your bonus, not you as a studio. Look at it from it being your film that you made. You're Kevin Feige, you're James Gunn, you're Christopher Nolan, and they're lowballing your film. That's what you have to look, not just look at the studio, because I think I've argued with friends of mine and they say, well, Tenet wasn't that good. So, like, you know, he saw it on HBO Max and it sucked, and he now wants money, like that sort of thing. It's just like, no, let's look at these guys who, it's not just angry, a temper tantrum from Christopher Nolan. It's a lot more, but they kind of, you know, it's not till we've seen these separate things, but now the Times has put it all into one article saying that it was hidden. People would have said something about this, and they're not happy about 17 films being released, you're saying simultaneously released at the theaters and there, because then the studio also has leverage. So if HBO Max is doing good, and I don't like the, you know, because I always still look at HBO as them taking their Cinemax thing and turning that into a streaming service as HBO Max, and it's kind of just sort of mashing it together. And these are the same guys that lost boxing, where now boxing is like a DAZN thing, whereas HBO was boxing. They just didn't know how, they thought they were more important than boxing and not picking in the right things. They were kind of like, we're going to back this guy, and we're going to back that guy, and we're going to back Don King. Now we're going to go with Golden Boy. Now we don't have anything. Now we're just shutting it all down. Like, these guys kind of always been like, we're HBO. We're the gimmick, not these other things. So, and ultimately, when you're buying a movie, you have to say, wow, this is going to do great on our service. Where they're like, nah, we put it on there, make our streaming service better. That sort of thing.
Their thing is that their model is a very expensive model. It's a dedicated model to a particular bunch of stuff. like you just said, they've always had the possibility of doing a Netflix. They've always had Cinemax. You know, they have HBO that streams every single day in 40, 50 million households throughout the country. And that's why the rollout was not as well as it could possibly have been. They had this huge merger coming on them, but also they couldn't, how can I say, cannibalize HBO to put up HBO Max. They couldn't say, hey, we're going to have this at $5.99 or $6.99 like Disney did, because a lot of their money comes from those subscriptions of HBO and Cinemax that are sold to the cable companies. And those guys go, 50% each. So if you have a $10 HBO subscription, you know, $5 going to the cable companies, and they're not going to be happy, you know, and that's one of the reasons why they couldn't undercut. But now they're trying to get everybody onto the streaming. And like they said, I think they only had 6 million versus subscribers relative to Disney Plus had over 60 million, and Netflix had over 120 million, you know, depending on how you count it.
That's why Nolan said it's the worst. I just want to cut and say he said it's the worst streaming service.
It's worse. It's not the worst in terms of quality, because a lot of people who've seen it said there's a lot of good stuff there. It's the worst in terms of people just haven't adopted it. They hadn't done a good job of placing it. And like Cal said, they set up a whole streaming service for their comic book stuff, and then they basically started gutting it, moving things over to HBO Max. Their strategy has been fragmented from once. And we can see this. Look at the Batman movies. Look at the movies that they've been putting out. There's no cohesive, since the problems with the Zack Snyder movies initially, there's been no cohesive glue or plan. Hey, you want to do an Aquaman film? Do it. You want to do a Wonder Woman film? Do it. You're all in your own universe. Yo, you want to do a Joker film? Do it. And we can see how the strategy is coming up. It doesn't make any sense, you know. But now AT&T is in charge, and they're like, we need to maximize what we can. And they're making shakes. They're making moves. One last point I want to make. I saw Dunkirk, and I'm a huge movie fan. I love to go to movie theaters. I think they're great, and I think they're for certain audience. But I think, like again, I say the number of people going to movie theaters has been going down steadily for years, decades, not years, decades. And that's a problem. The cleanliness in the movie theaters, people who disrupt movies. You know, sometimes the quality movies aren't there. But that's a whole nother argument. But what I want to say, Dunkirk, I don't think it was that great of a movie. I came out of that film and I was like, huh?
Why is he bringing up Dunkirk?
1917 was far better. You know, I'm saying this film was like, just because Nolan put his thing on it, I thought it was all over the place. And so when you say, oh, Tenet isn't that good, if it's better than doggone Dunkirk, you know what I'm trying to say? Give me a break. Nolan, as an auteur, now can do a 3-hour movie and people won't even blink. You know, and you're like, what the heck just happened here? Give me a story, you know what I'm trying to say, that you can make some money off of. You know, put a budget down that I can make some money off of. That's what the studios want to say.
But he's one of the few.
Wait, Cal wants to say something. Cal's raising his hand. What do you say, Cal?
I'm not raising my hand.
He's one of the few filmmakers, like, say, Steven Soderbergh, like Steven Spielberg, one of the most recent talents, able to just, you know, decide he wants to make a movie, and they'll let him make it because of the proven track record. So I'm saying that's going to be cut, and the same thing that Feige's protective of, which they should be, that, you know, this power, being able to greenlight a movie that's successful is, you know, of what they want to do is important to have. We haven't really had that in a while. Most of the time in history, people get like 3 films to sort of figure if you're going to be a mainstay. And even then, it kind of, if you have a bomb, it kind of could hurt you. It could kind of like, you know, they say like the Magic Mike is what kind of put Steven Soderbergh back to where he can just say, all right, I want to do this sort of thing. Whereas basically back in the day, people would make a film and they make one that was a meager hit and they'd be like, it's just a movie. It didn't really do anything. And so now they're pulling your numbers out and say, look at these numbers. Terrible. We're not listening to you. Here's Hot Tub Time Machine. Direct that sort of thing. So,
yeah. But then it makes money.
That's the well, they did a second one. So the Hot Tub Time Machine did work for them.
Here you go. You don't know what you're doing. Go make this movie over here. What? It made money.
Hey, there's an audience, man. There's an audience. So, I mean, as long as if the budget is good enough, if you have the right budget, the proper marketing, there's probably an audience for what you want, you know? But you have to have the right budget.
I think you said everything except for a good story.
That's the thing. He's
you said everything except for good stories. Like, I guess as long as we have the money and we market this crap, you know, people will come out for it. But what about a good story?
that is just assumed. There's no need for me to say a good story.
You can't wait for another, what's the name, Soul Plane 2? Soul Plane made us some money.
Or Snake in the Plane, which I liked.
Snakes on the train. They don't.
They got on the train.
Hey, they would have done it. If Snakes on a Plane had gone really, really gangbusters for them, it would have been Snakes on a Train. Then it would have been Snakes in the Rain. You know, they would just keep it doing.
There was a Kangaroo. What was that movie, the Kangaroo thing with Anthony Anderson? Like those really bad movies that they just have on the shelf, but they have money behind it. And it's like, this is ready to direct, but everyone said, no, pass. So, I mean, that's the thing. And I think the studios, these guys sort of, these guys know what they're doing. James Gunn, that, and the talent want to get paid. So it's like, it'll really be a big shift if they immediately jump and say, the theaters are kind of over. Everyone's to be like that movie WALL-E and sit in their chair and have their drinks right next to them at home and watch a movie in your pajamas. There is some fun to watch a movie in your pajamas, but there's fun going out to the theaters. So let's not sell out the theaters.
I don't think we're selling out the theater. I'm just saying there's a portion of people who would like to go to theaters. I don't think it's a declining portion unless they can somehow make the experience. The key word is experience of going to the theater a good experience. You no longer have to go to the theater to see a show, right? And so again, the numbers are there. The declining percent of people watching movies, going to theaters is there. All this is just saying is, hey, let's face reality and let's just start doing some streaming directly. That's all we're saying. You can continue to do stuff in the theater. I don't know why they can't do both. Why? Because the movie theaters companies have invested billions in real estate and renovations, but in the new theaters, but they don't keep up the old theaters. I mean, I can say that here. I can say that here in New York, where you have they used to have a Magic Johnson theater, used to be kept up pretty well. They used to have a theater, 42nd Street, which is their premier theater in the city, but they don't do quite a great job as they once did. And that's because they've had various mergers and acquisitions, and they're opening up new theaters. Why don't we focus on the ones we got? That's what I say. And do a great job at that. Make it one of the best experiences. People come in like, wow, the bathrooms are all on the same floor.
Can you also go longer on that point? Because you were pointing out what happens to these theaters where Magic Johnson is once the owner,
right?
Kind of sell it off.
So the Magic Johnson theaters at one point was being licensed, the name licensed when they were opening up. I think there were Sony theaters initially at one point, and so that company got bought out. And when that happened, well, one of the things Magic Johnson was saying, in his theaters was like, hey, we're going to have more security, more service, to get people into these theaters. And they were a success and they made money for the company. But when the new company took over, they're like, hey, we got to cut costs. We don't need to have the same level of service because it's doing well. We don't have to have the same level of security. I mean, and so they invested less in the theaters that they currently had. And it wasn't just there, it's all over.
Yeah.
And so the wear and tear. And so that's a problem because
that's basic. What you're talking about is just basic business. Okay.
Bad business.
That's used to come over to the gas station and you come out and four guys while you get your gas pumped, your windows washed, your tires, and then they realize, hey, you know what? We can take away all this stuff and we'll still get you to come to the gas station. You know why? Because you need the gas.
Yes.
So yeah, if we take away all this stuff, will you still come to the theater for the theater experience? Yes. You'll still come because there are certain films. I saw Get Out. Everybody else saw Get Out long before I did. So I saw this on TV at my home. But there were scenes that I could already imagine. This probably killed in the theater. This right here killed in the theater. It's the same thing with music. There's certain songs, you listen to them on the radio, it's okay. You go out, you're listening to them in a lounge or a club, it's a totally different experience. Played different. And then it's the same thing. When they're making these films, they're not making these films for television or a 60-inch screen or an 80-inch screen. They're making them for these really large screens and for audiences with pauses. This is going to be the moment where the audience is going to come in right here, and we want to make certain that nobody misses anything with the next line of dialogue that comes along with it. I don't disagree with you about the upkeep and making the theater experience a good one, but people have shown, unfortunately, that we can lessen the quality and you'll still come out. And then the other problem is, okay, we want to maintain this level of quality. Are you willing to pay for it? No. You know, I'm not going to pay for it. I want great quality and I want a great experience, but I'm not willing to pay for the. It's like a problem like landlords have. You've had a tenant for 10 years. It's the same space. You got to raise the rent. Why you got to raise the rent? The place hasn't changed. What about the electricity and the water? These costs went up. I don't want to pay any of that type of stuff. And then what do they'll show? People will continue on even if you lessen the quality. So I guess there has to be some forward-thinking determination with it. But I think the business guys just look back at the older models, and not when it comes to film, but when it comes to things like radio, where they're like, oh, radio's going to die, with film, and radio remained. Oh, film is going to die with television, and film remained. Oh, television's going to die with no, and television remains. It's not necessarily. It has a lot more competition now, so it's not going to necessarily be the big bully on the block that it was, but it's not going to go anywhere. And people still, if there's one thing that I have learned in this time of Corona, is that yes, people want that experience of being able to go out and experience these things with other people. Because I have never seen so many people lose their minds from having to stay home and not being able to associate with other people. So yes, there are some people who will be a lark. Oh, let's go to the theater and see that sort of stuff. But the majority of the people actually like communal experiences. And going to the theater is a communal experience. Can you make it a better one? Of course. Are people going to want to pay for it? Of course not. So you have to try to marry those. You're going to have to try to marry those two. We're like, hey, you're going to get the. That's how they were able to get people out in the first place. Well, you could only see it in the theater first. So, it's either you had to be that very patient person. I'm going to wait 6 months. And, I'll see it for free on TV, or I'll see it, when it gets to streaming, or I'll buy the DVD. But most people are like, I don't want to wait that, I don't want to wait that long to save $15. I'll go see it now. And that has always been the allure of the theater. It's coming here first, only in theaters. You mess around with that, okay, fine. It used to be, if people are like, well, I don't have to wait 6 months, I only have to wait, a few days, then they'll do that. And I don't know what your bottom line is going to be afterwards, but.
Right. I mean, but I agree with you there, but clearly, like, I was just looking at a graph, and the graph basically said, like, less than 10% of the U.S. population goes to the movies, right? Back in 1930s, it was 65% of the population goes to see movies, right?
In the United States?
In the United States, and it's been a steady decline. And, of course...
I'm sorry. Less than 10%?
Less than 10%.
Yeah, I don't think that's right.
I'll shoot you the stats if you don't believe it. I'm trying to say. But the point I'm trying to say is that there's different, because back then the TV wasn't as universal, naturally. You also had radio. You also had the cost. And you also had the Great Depression. The Great Depression, people were going out to the movies to see this. But nowadays, it's not the same thing. You can see a movie. You can see it right in the movie theater. You can wait till it comes out on pay-per-view. You can wait till it comes out on streaming. So there's different options for you. So it depends on the type of person you are. There's just so many options that you can do to see the movie. But the fact of the matter goes on. The cost of the movie is also grown exponentially. A movie in 1964 was $1.86. Okay? Yeah, that sounds low, but that was probably roughly around $15 back then. In our dollars. Now, if you take, and this is for a date, and if you go on a date now, you're talking about like $30 or more. We're not even talking about New York money, because the film starts at $17. Before you even buy the popcorn.
Babe's gotta eat, man.
Yeah, so you're talking about easy. So you're talking about easy $50. So I mean, the numbers alone tell you.
But the thing that I had to correct you on is that movies were dying out in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And then the blockbuster, because they didn't know there were going to be blockbusters when Jaws and Star Wars and all that stuff happened. So it was like, they made the screen wider. They did that because it used to be square like television. They're like, oh, let's make it wider. So we're still struggling. And then that's when he got to the blockbuster, where it kind of brought everything back. So this thing of, even in the 80s, they were talking about the Broadway might not be there anymore. And then they started busing people to Broadway. So we can't immediately just act like we're watching evolution happen, and this is the dinosaur dying out. Whereas we still have this viable form that's there, that if once we get out of this pandemic, we might want to just take, yes, the theater can be problematic at times, but I still like to see the theater and the movie, to go into the movies and being in the theater experience. And sometimes I'll get the French fries and and the reclining seats and all that. But yes, the upkeep is something that we should always be the case, and kind of policing the, and I've seen kids be able to police the the nonsense that goes in there, of stopping the film and say we're not moving forward until you guys stop talking, that sort of thing, or you guys have to leave, that sort of thing. You can do it, and you don't have to be, have to fight about it. So I think this premature, waiting for the extinction of movies is a little too much to go. Yes, the movies cost.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I think that there's a market.
You've been rooting for that since we started this show.
No, I'm saying there's a market for movies. I just don't. I don't think
streaming is in.
It is, and I don't think that there is.
See, you just did it. You just did it right there.
You can have streaming and you can have movies, but I don't think it's going to be the same type of industry it's been for a long time. It may be a more smaller, specialized.
That's like comic books or any other industry. Once you have competition, it changes.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. It's going to have to change. The way the model moves. It's not working the way it currently is. Right now, they're dead. And like I said, things have been happening. These companies work on a very bare, very small profit margins, and they're constantly going into bankruptcy because the cost to keep these theaters up, the cost of acquisition is expensive. And that's what's been going on with these companies for a long time. It's not something new. Theater companies have been hitting the skids for a very long time, whether you know it or not. This is just, the pandemic has just exposed them all. Like, okay, you're exposed, bro. You know what I'm trying to say? That's all it is. I like the movie going experience when it's good. I don't like it when the air conditioner is off. I don't like it when I go to a seat and people are talking. I don't like it when people put their feet up on the chairs. Stuff like that. Or
all of our viewership that you're old and crotchety. What's the point?
What's the old and crotchety? That's what happens when you go to. You think it's cool to have someone put their seat on the back of your chair or by you? You want to be smelling feet? Hey, if that's your thing, that's your fetish, bro.
I don't know what theaters you're going to. I go to respectable, reputable theaters. I'm not sure.
I go to respectable, the big ones in New York City, the downtown. People are talking.
I go to a respectable theater where people are putting their feet on the back of someone else's seat. I get stage. So that would never happen. I get like the lounge type stuff. I don't know what you're doing.
Okay, I don't know. So we'll have to agree to disagree.
He's had a big preview there. With that said,
go to a better theater.
That's
the thing. That's the thing.
More money.
Oh, you're still going to the rugby?
There's still more money, guys. So listen, is there anything else you guys need to add, or are we covered this whole thing?
Short term, yes. Long term, no. You got to put people in seats.
I think you can do it by also. I think you can do it by also doing streaming or streaming pay-per-view.
Yeah,
and stuff.
You can. Why would you don't? I'm not saying you. Nobody is saying, hey, no to pay-per-view or no to this. They've been saying yes to that for years. And
at the same time.
And now you've got this time over here. The biggest criticism I'll get is too many times they have this executive mind state where everything is right in that moment. How are we going to deal with it in this moment? And there's not enough long-term thought. And then that's so right now, yes, the situation where people can't come together should be, okay, fine. These are how we can actually make money along these lines here. But you don't want to give up. You don't want to give up a revenue stream that's been working for you since the 1940s, even if it's been on declines, as this article supposedly says. Obviously, you've been making money there. You're not losing money there in terms of the overall companies. So you want to still maximize. You still want to maximize that. In terms of theaters, those guys, if those guys are in such dire straits, you would think that they would put their heads together and say, look, what's the problem? Okay, this is the problem. How do we address the problem? Okay, and then you go from there. You can give a high quality experience. You can give a high quality experience without having to necessarily charge through the roof for it. But that has to be a determination on them. When I go to the theater, great experience. When you go to the theater, somebody's kicking you in your chair. Of course you want to stay home. I want to go to the theater because I'm having a good time. You want to stay home like the crotchety old man that you are because, hey, whippersnapper, shut up. Stop talking during the movie. Don't come down there. Who wants to do
or putting on your cell phone in the movie theater. Ugh.
I invite you to come to my theater.
Well, I will go. I've been to quite a few things. I'll go. You can't go to Midtown. That's considered a very good theater. The 42nd and 34th Street. I've been to all those theaters out there. Okay, so I don't know. All right, guys, listen. Anything else?
I think we covered it.
Okay, good. I think we've done a good job. Just want to say, once just to recap that, hey, the wave is here. Things are going to change. Artists, I'm sorry, that they're going to have to probably make new deals, or the structure of the movie business will have to change.
Doing?
I'm giving a recap.
Why are you trying to chase people off?
I'm trying to recap what we all agreed on.
Yeah, he didn't mean that. He didn't mean any of that.
You know,
Spin a rack.
Out. Way out.
I didn't say spin a rack out.